All right. Okay, good morning, beautifuls. This morning I've got a guest with me. I have, many of you know my journey, my cancer journey, and when I first started on that, I found a Dr. Wilson who I really liked some of his information, and I wanted to work with him and find out more about him. But the only way I could work with him is to work with someone who was trained in what he did, which is nutritional balancing. And so I found Todd Lizon, who's a chiropractor. He's been a chiropractor for 18 years and started working with him. So welcome, Todd.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be doing this with you.
I know, it's really exciting. I've been a client of Todd's for, about 4 years now.
Yep.
And, my life has evolved over the last 4 years, as you'll hear a little bit about later on. And, but yeah, first of all, I just want to find out about you, Todd. You've been doing nutritional balancing for a long time. How did you get started?
Yeah, it was a really interesting process of getting started with nutritional balancing because it wasn't a conscious decision. It kind of happened more coincidentally, and there was really two key elements that really occurred to spur me into doing this sort of work. The first was a heart attack, and I'll come back to that in a second. The heart attack was at age 33.
Wow.
Yeah, that was something in and of itself. But the second thing was I actually just coincidentally, one of those synchronicities, I had a patient come into my chiropractic clinic, and he literally came in with a DVD that was full of about 200 textbooks and dozens of MP3s. And this guy it was almost like he was speaking a different language. He was just going on and on about copper overloads and all kinds of methylation things and all these other things. And I thought, what is this guy going on about? But he asked me to actually read the textbooks or listen to the MP3s. And I smiled and nodded and I said, look, I'll see what I can do. And I did, but I didn't really do it quick enough. So he came back in. I told him honestly, I haven't really had a good chance to look at it yet, but I will, because at the time I was commuting. So I was driving back and forth quite a long distance. And I realized quickly there was no way I was going to be able to read all the books. But the MP3s looked really, really interesting. And the MP3s were by Dr. Wilson, who you mentioned earlier. And I started listening to these MP3s, and it was like a light bulb moment went off. It was absolutely incredible because, see, as a chiropractor, I'm always helping people with physical issues, right? So helping people with neck problems, backs, knees, whatever it is. But the paradigm, the way that we look at health as chiropractors is very much all about treating the cause of a problem, the root cause of a problem, and not just the symptom. So that's a really key point in my journey because I was getting people coming into my clinic and they were asking me, what do I do with my high blood pressure? Or what do I do with, what do I do with my diabetes? And it was always bugging me because I didn't know who to send them to. I've got nothing against other health professionals, but I do have issues with how you address health concerns. So I ended up looking at all of this, and it was fantastic, that light bulb moment, because I was able to now look at root causes. Nutritional balancing is all about looking at the root causes of the problem, and that was what really got me into it.
Yeah. So tell us about nutritional balancing. What is it?
Yeah, nutritional balancing is looking at the root cause in a holistic fashion. And I'll just very, very quickly make one more point before I move into how a nutritional balancing program works. The heart attack that I mentioned, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that again. 33, you've got 3 kids, you told you have a heart attack. That's a pretty life-altering moment. And at that point, it really hit me that I had to make some changes. And I made major lifestyle changes that involved moving from Canada to Australia.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a big one. But you want to know what the more revealing insight was from that incident is that I'd already been a chiropractor for at least 7 or 8 years at that point. You'd think that a health professional would know better than to be burning themselves at both ends of that sort of, candle, right? Where you just go, where you're thinking, more work is better, time is money. But I had the knowledge, but I didn't actually apply the actual behaviors. So the heart attack was a real wake-up call to make me look at all aspects of my life and become more congruent with what I was actually preaching. And that was a real wake-up call. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's how the heart attack kind of figured into things.
Yeah. Wow.
But with the nutritional, it was a wake-up call for sure.
Yeah.
With the nutritional balancing program, it actually, like I said, starts with that holistic approach. It's looking for the root cause of the problem. And the tool that we use to do that, because you have to have your tools, the tool that we use is a hair mineral analysis.
Yeah.
And a hair mineral analysis is a tissue test. So it's really looking at the root causes, the deeper levels of what goes wrong with people. And yeah, the way that a nutritional balancing program works is we get the hair mineral analysis test done. When those results come back, we process them, we create, and this is the key point here, a personalized health program for people. So the supplements, and this is not a supplement program, but when we do deal with supplements, we personalize them to make sure that the person's getting the right ones in the right amounts for them.
Yeah.
And that's key, as I think you found out over time.
Yeah.
The reason it's key is because we have to acknowledge, and this is the double-edged sword, that if we acknowledge that supplements and nutrition can make a difference to someone's health, then we have to acknowledge the flip side of the coin, which is if you use the wrong ones, that can have a detrimental effect.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really important point. And that's why I love the hair mineral analysis, because it brings a level of objectivity to these programs that we do. So the program is much more, though, than just supplements. It also includes, lifestyle, diet, detox, emotional. That's really, really how a nutritional balancing program works.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, as you found out, I function as a teacher. So I'm trying to teach people about things, but all too often it's also as a coach, because people need to be taught and coached, and you can't hold their hand, but they need to know that someone's there to help them along the way, because it is a bit of a difficult, winding journey at times, and it's really important to have someone there that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know from my own experience, I always look forward to our, 6 monthly or yearly meetups just to make sure that I was on the right track. You do need that support, absolutely. And I love the science. As a dietitian, I love the science behind hair mineral analysis, and the fact I think that's what I'm realizing in my own profession is that everyone's different, and we need to treat everyone as individuals. So, so just a little bit of clarification. What is the difference between hair mineral analysis and, say, a blood test?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I get that one a lot, actually, about blood tests. And the thing we need to remember with the test is it's testing a very specific thing. So blood is giving you indicators on what's happening, obviously, in the blood. If you think about chronic degenerative diseases, though, they don't happen in the blood. They're actually happening in the tissues. Right? It's a tissue problem where the chronic degenerative problems are happening. So ideally, if you want to know what's going on in the liver, you do a biopsy, in the bone, in the brain, wherever it is. But not all tissues are easily biopsied. It's expensive, it's invasive, and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So what we use is the hair tissue. And the hair tissue is great because 1 centimeter of growth is representing 1 month of time for that person.
Right.
So when you do 3 centimeters of growth, you're getting a 3-month average of what's been happening with the minerals in that person. That's huge to be able to then use as a guiding and an assessing sort of tool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And the other analogy that I use to really make it clear for people is that if you were to break a bone, would you want to get a blood test or an X-ray? And the answer is, of course, you'd get an X-ray. Getting a blood test would be silly. And that's the way that I look at tissue tests versus blood tests. If you want to know what's going on in the tissues, do the tissue test for that more deeper information, or what you would say, sort of subclinical information.
Yeah. And look, our bodies are amazing. They really are. They're designed to heal themselves. And if we give our body the right environment and the right foods, we can heal. We can do so much more than the average person realizes,
Absolutely.
Now, Todd, you talk a lot about the stress response. What is that?
Yeah, the stress response I talk about a lot because at the end of the day, it is ultimately the root cause of almost all chronic degenerative problems.
Yeah.
So by stress, it's not just emotional stress like people might be thinking when they listen to this. It's all forms of stress. And by that, I mean physical stresses, emotional or mental, spiritual stresses, as well as chemical or toxic stresses. That can include things like parasites and things like that. So when you look at all these three stresses, the short summary that I just sort of explained to people is that the stress response, and the example would be a crocodile jumping out at you, right? A crocodile would be a big stress. When that happens, the stress response is predictable and reproducible, meaning that it's the same for everyone. And it doesn't matter whether it's a physical stress, emotional, or chemical stress, it's the same response. So your stress hormones kick into gear, and they do things like raise your blood pressure, they raise your sugar levels, they raise your cholesterol levels. And this is the nuts and bolts version, but they do that for a reason, right? There's
Yeah.
a reason to do that. And then the problem is, if the crocodile never goes away, if it's always nipping at your heels 2, 3, 4 feet behind you, you can
Yeah.
imagine then your stress hormone levels will be chronically elevated.
Mm.
Over time, that means that your blood pressure, your blood sugars will also start to become chronically elevated. And there you have the root cause of chronic degenerative disease.
Yeah.
That's why I focus on stress and the stress response with so many people. And the hair mineral analysis test is essentially measuring what stress is doing to your body over that 3-month period of time.
Mm, mm. And it's just so, I just love the research coming out about this. You are so right. We wake up in the morning and we're stressed, and then we throw back a coffee. Well, people don't realize that stresses you out. Then you have a high sugar, breakfast, that stresses your body out. And then you get to work and you get stressed out about how many emails you've got, and it just goes on and on and on. And then, you've sprayed on perfume. Well, that stresses your body out. It's
Yeah.
all these things that people don't realize are causing the stress response, So,
Yep.
yeah. Look, why aren't more professionals using this approach?
Primarily, it's because they're not trained to look at health and wellness from this perspective. So if we talk about medical professionals who I've great respect for, there's certainly a time and a
Me too.
place.
Yeah.
I'm not fanatical in either direction, but if we look at how they're trained, they are trained to deal with a symptom.
Yeah.
And that's great for a lot of things, but it's not great for chronic degenerative problems. So the
Mm.
first problem is really the paradigm and how you view health. So all view health, like you said earlier, as the body having that innate capacity to heal itself when you give it what it needs and remove the interference.
Mm.
And that's not something that a lot of people really get trained in. I'll give you an analogy. My, at the time, 8-year-old daughter was reading a human encyclopedia book. And in it, there was a little sentence in there that she came to me and she goes, Dad, this is so gross. You have to hear this. And she's just the funniest little thing. And she reads the sentence and it says, in the time it takes you to read this one sentence, 3,000 skin cells fall off of you. And and at this point, you can see she's thinking it's just gross, but I'm thinking I've got an opportunity to teach this kid. So I kind of flipped it around at her and I looked at her, and you know how dads are always joking around with their kids and they don't know half the time if you're telling the truth or if you're pulling their leg. I looked at her and I said, so are you going to run out of skin? And she paused and she hesitated, and the big brown eyes looking at you. And then I went, no, don't worry, you're not going to run out of skin. But what happens is,
Mm.
these skin cells are falling off of you, which means that there's skin cells that are generating and being formed behind it. So the
Mm.
skin you have today is not the skin that you had, a year ago. And the point then for us in this conversation is we have to remember every cell in the body is doing that. Virtually every human cell is doing that. Even something you don't think about like bones. So
Yeah.
if you've
Yeah.
got lead deposited in a bone, it may take you 7 to 10 years for that lead cell, the lead in the bone cell, to come up for renewal. But when it does, if you've got adequate calcium coming in through your diet and through your overall program, your body will then eliminate that lead, replace it with the calcium, and have proper bone function.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just that people don't generally understand this paradigm of health. And I think that's why even naturopaths, who again I have great respect for, they're often, not always, still symptom based. They're still treating a symptom but they're just doing it with a natural remedy. And while that's better, it's still not getting to the root cause. So I find that of all the formally trained health professionals, there's very, very few that are taught in school this paradigm of holistic health. And I think that's probably why we're not seeing more people use this sort of approach.
Yeah. And it is, look, there's certainly more coming to the forefront. There's definitely even more GPs who are doing functional medicine and trying to get to the root cause, which is really exciting. Todd, rounding up, what would be your take-home message?
The message that I'm always giving people is really twofold. Always address the root cause. That's the key. We cannot get seduced. And I said this with someone on the phone yesterday. It's almost like a Star Wars analogy. We can't get seduced by the dark side. We have to really, really look at it and focus on root causes, which is difficult because everyone wants to focus on symptoms. So root cause is key. And the second takeaway point is address your stress.
Yeah, so agree.
Very important. And the challenge there is that there's a lot of stresses that people, and I like this saying, can't or won't address. And it often takes traumatic times for people to address those stresses. For me, whether it be the heart attack, for you, I know there's been other reasons that have gone on that have forced you to address a few things. You know, we always have to have our reason, but we must address our stress. And then in turn, we have to have patience with ourselves. We have to really have patience with the process so that we don't get frustrated by the whole overall approach.
Because this is so not a quick fix.
No.
And, which aligns with my beliefs of, I don't do diets. It has to be a lifestyle change. And that's exactly what you're saying. This has to be a lifestyle approach. And which is great. Yeah.
So that's the root message of it all. Is when I summarize a nutritional balancing program, you have to, in the sort of the core of it, you have to address your stresses, reduce or eliminate what you can. What you can't or won't reduce or eliminate, then you have to contain it with things like diet, lifestyle, deep breathing, stress management, the detox, all the lifestyle factors. That's how nutritional balancing works. So I just absolutely love it. I encourage anyone that's interested in a nutritional balancing program to contact us on our website or by email as well. I always get back to emails.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Todd. It's been great chatting with you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Nick. Absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.